very, very happy to welcome you all to this, our second Sacred Mathematics and Liberal Arts Festival. I'm a co-founder with Sylvia Franklin here of the Mathematics and Mythos CIC. And this time we are collaborating with the Scientific and Medical Network, which is very exciting, and you will hear more about how this is important. Okay, yes, thank you. Yes, I will. So I won't say a lot now. We're going to do an introduction, myself, Sylvia, and David Lorimer on behalf of the Scientific and Medical Network. I need to do the orientation, the housekeeping first, obviously. So you're all here. This is the theatre. There are fire exits that you can see marked if you hear a fire alarm, and also in the lecture room, because there are some practicals later that you can do as you know on schedule of the paneurythmy or the eurythmy, and that's happening in the lecture room, which is on the second floor. If you hear a fire alarm, which will be very, very loud, then you have to go to a fire exit, and then you will be guided by one of our team members to the point, the gathering point. So we have 5 lovely team members, and they are the people, if you have any queries during the day, to go and see. So I'm going to ask people to stand up. You can just have a quick look around behind. There's Anne here, and then there's Susanna as well. And out at the front at the moment, there's Richard, and Clive and Linda. So those are the people that you would need to go and see. So the title of this festival is Chapter 1, The Heart of the Rose. And the meaning of this will unfold in the festival. And for now, what I would like is to have a moment's pause. We're going to hear some wonderful singing from Julia Soper, some Arabic singing, which she will introduce. But before we do that, I think it would be good to pause. As we know, the sacred is here all the time. It's just opening to it. And so we have an opportunity today, we are very privileged to be able to gather today and tomorrow to enter into ways to remind us how to open to the sacred. The sacred, as we say in our mathematics and mythos strapline, is within and beyond number and word. It's beyond. So I'm going to see if I can just find my bell to open a pause and to complete it, so that we are in tune with our own sacred and the great sacred, which we will have the opportunity to hear opened through this beautiful singing. So where are you, little bell? Here we go, thank you. So I'll ring the bell, and then we'll have a pause, about a minute, and we'll just go in. And I'll ring it again, and then we can come out. And then Julia will sing and present the singing.
going to sing a Turkish piece, which is a Turkish form called Mandira, on Maqam Hijaz, which is the mode belonging to the Hijazi region of the Arabian Peninsula. And so it's a very important maqam because it's the area that contains Mecca and Medina, the holiest sites of Islam. And I wanted to bring this really in connection with the fact that a lot of our mathematics comes from there originally, and even from pre-Islamic times. I'm going to sing the Mandira, which is normally instrumental, on 22 of the 99 names of God, which are divine aspects, such as Rahman, Rahim, which means the compassionate and the merciful, the first of the divine names, and other names like the highest and the other things that we associate with God, like love and gentleness and beauty and majesty. So I hope you enjoy it. And it's in 7/18, by the way. So it's 7 and 8. So see if you can follow the 7 rhythm. Probably all recognise the Rosa Punjab Shatra. So, can you speak up, Nicola? Thank you for reminding me. Do remind us if any of us, like myself, slip. Right.
Sacred Mathematics and the Liberal Arts Festival, Chapter 1, The Heart of the Rose. Now, Sylvia and I are from the Mathematics and Mythos. I'm from the Mathematics, and she is from the Mythos. And David Lorimer is from the Scientific and Medical Network. And we've come together because this is a very important time. The liberal arts now are needed. They are a brilliant, there are 7 liberal arts. There are the three verbal arts of grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and the 4 mathematical arts of number, of space, of music, and astronomy. They are a brilliant basis for further or higher education. The verbal arts give us the foundation of being able to use language more meaningfully, more precisely, and to understand what is coming to us, to receive it in a deeper way. The mathematical arts, number and space, are, apart from anything else, they are essential to our social interactions as human becomings in this world. This I'll be going into in my talk presentation tomorrow. The music and the astronomy then take us further. Number and space can take us further. Music and astronomy clearly do. The music takes us into the inner infinitude, into the divine within, through our hearing. The astronomy takes us to the great, great cosmos around us, our situation on Mother Earth in this wonderful universe. This foundation is what is needed. It was what was in Chartres, which Sylvia will go into more now, because I come from the mathematical stream and she comes from the spiritual streams and the Cathars, the Templars and the Rosicrucians. David is also linked with the Cathars. I think now he's going to be talking more about the Scientific and Medical Network, which have started a brilliant project which is called the Galileo Commission, which he'll be saying something about, which is because now it is time for the paradigm shift, a new paradigm shift in science, as there was with Galileo. And I think that's all I need to say now. Would you like to?
I shall try to.
I want to say one more thing, because I come from Pythagoras. It's the holistic mathematics of Pythagoras is in the quadrivium, and that is balancing the technical, which is what we have now, with the spiritual, the quantitative, which we have now, with the qualitative, and the visual, which we have so much in our society, with the hearing, which we have just experienced.
Thank you, Nicola. Rudolf Steiner observed that human consciousness is constantly changing, and that a very, very long time ago, in very early centuries, people directly experienced the powers behind nature. So that when the early Celtic tribes came to northern France, which in the very early times was still connected to Britain physically, they could walk across, they found the site of Chartres as an ideal place for the interaction between the spiritual world and the earth, geographically and also with the geology of the place. Chartres is orientated to the midsummer sunrise, all to do with the early Celtic beliefs. And then when later Charles the Bald wanted to found a church on this same site, he asked John Scotus Erigena, I never know how to pronounce his name, Erigena, to translate the works of Dionysius the Areopagite. And John Scotus himself was from the Hibernian Mysteries, the most ancient of the mysteries of the ancient world, according to Rudolf Steiner. And so he translated Dionysius' work. Dionysius was from a very rich Athenian family, and just as today people go to universities, he went to study at the mystery centers, beginning with Aloysius. He studied the Eleusinian mysteries. Then he went to Heliopolis. And while he was at Heliopolis, it was the same time as the Passion of Christ. He witnessed the darkening of the sun. And he thought to himself, something very, very important is happening. A new god has come into the firmament of the ancient Greek gods, the ones he had learnt about, the planetary beings. And so then, 14 years later, when he went back to Athens and became a counselor there, he actually changed, I'm not sure if it was one of the shrines, but at least some of the shrines of the ancient gods, and wrote instead to an unknown god, because he had no idea who this was. And so 14 years later, St. Paul came and spoke on Areopagus Hill, the Hill of Mars, and Dionysius went and heard him speak about the Passion. He rushed home, found his diary, and discovered, yes, this was the time he had seen the darkening of the sun. He was so impressed also with what Paul had to say that he followed Paul, and was then in the most wonderful position to transform his knowledge of the ancient pagan pantheon of the planetary gods into the Christian hierarchies. Not just for Christianity, but these hierarchies are known by many religions, but this is the 9 hierarchies of angels that he then expounded about, and this was taught together with the Platonic wisdom, with the Pythagorean wisdom at Chartres. So the great masters of Chartres came into being and taught with a sadly decreasing vision of the spiritual world, because this all slowly came to an end, the great golden age of Chartres. All the direct knowledge was then transformed all across the board into the myth we have now, so that's what I'm about. And then at that point, Steiner describes how Plato told Aristotle that from now onwards he must transform the mystery wisdom that Plato had presented into conceptual knowledge, and that the changing consciousness of man could no longer take the ancient mystery knowledge, so that then Aristotle and the scholastics would come to the fore. But Steiner actually described how at the end of the 20th century, the Platonists and the Aristotelians would return to the earth, not just in the Anthroposophical Society, but in the Scientific and Medical Network, in many walks of life that are interested in this subject. There would be a reviving of interest in the impulse of Chartres, both Platonic and Aristotelian.
So, over to you, David.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for that. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Scientific and Medical Network. The network, for those of you who don't know it, is an informal network of scientists, doctors, engineers, people interested in shifting the paradigm and exploring the interface between science, consciousness and spirituality. And so we're very pleased to be part of this. My own interest in Greek philosophy goes back quite a long way. I suppose to when I was an undergraduate and I read History of Western Philosophy by Bertrand Russell, where there is a long section on the pre-Socratics. And also he's rather rude about Pythagoras. He says that he's a cross between Einstein and Mary Baker Eddy, which is. But I also, when I to study this and writing my own book, Survival, so there's a whole section on Greek views of immortality and the evolution of that. And one of my treasured books is Early Greek Philosophy by John Burnett, which is, he was professor of Greek at St Andrews in the 1890s. And I a big salary at that point. It cost £4, which is quite a lot of money in 1976. And so I hid it in the shop for a few weeks until I had a spare £4. And then I went and got it. And so more recently I've read Peter Kingsley's work. I didn't really know that. He's got a new book called Catafalque, which apparently is absolutely amazing, which I'm waiting to see. And then what I wanted to talk a little bit about is Richard Tarnas and his Passion of the Western Mind, which if this is a book you haven't yet read, then it should be top of your list, because it's a very brilliant survey of Western philosophy, and it's extremely well written. And so you can have a pleasure. You don't always have a lot of pleasure in his prose style, but Richard Tarnas is very, very good. And he says that the Greeks provided what he calls a global metaphysical perspective, and the legacy. And I'm just going to read some of this out because I think it's very, very interesting in the context of our modern world. There are 5 points in the Greek legacy. The first is that the world is an ordered cosmos corresponding to the order within the mind. An ordered cosmos corresponding to the order. So we have intelligibility. The intelligibility of the universe matches the way in which the human mind itself is structured. Secondly, the cosmos expresses a pervasive intelligence directly accessible to human awareness. That's both in terms of reason, but also more importantly, and I'll come back to this, in terms of gnosis. Third, penetrating intellectual analysis reveals a timeless order, which is a very Platonic statement. Fourth, knowledge of the world's underlying structure and meaning requires a plurality of human cognitive faculties, and this is also a very important point, which has been neglected. Rational, empirical, intuitive, aesthetic, imaginative, and moral ways of knowing. And then fifthly, the direct apprehension of the world's deeper reality satisfies not only the mind, but also the soul. And what you were saying is really about uncovering this deeper insight into what we might call the deeper structure of reality. And that's part of what the Galileo Commission is about. And I don't know whether we've got some copies of the report for you to buy. This is the initial draft of the report, which is a summary. So it has a summary of the argument and a summary of the overall report, which is being finalised as we speak. Harold said he'd get it to me on Wednesday. It's now Saturday, so he's obviously still working on it. So it's called Science Beyond the Materialist Worldview towards Post-Materialist Science. I think this is the new phrase you're going to hear quite a lot about, post-materialist science. So we had post-modernism, now we've got post-materialism. So this is something that we will be pursuing. And really my last point that I wanted to talk a little bit about, I'm going to talk more about this tomorrow, is what you might call the revival of gnosis, which is also the revival of spirituality. And so what this represents is direct experience, direct insight, knowledge of the one, knowledge of the self with a capital S, realization that we are all one, we are all expressions of the one universal consciousness. And this process, you might say, is a movement from darkness to light, which is movement out of Plato's cave, if I can put it this way. And it's interesting, if you look back at the Passion of the Western Mind, what Tarnas says about Ficino, and I've just reviewed his letters. There's a new edition of Ficino's letters that's come out. Restoring the light right to the liberal arts, he talks the Platonic doctrine from darkness to light, which you also find in the Upanishads, lead me from death to immortality, from darkness to light. And so I think this is a lot of what's needed in our world. There's a great deal of darkness, and we need to be shining the spiritual candle and bringing people back to the center of their beings, rather than the distractions where you're removed to the periphery. And I asked for this image to be put up, because this is probably the greatest stained glass window, or one of the greatest stained glass windows circles, whereas this one has these wonderful sort of geometrically organised squares as well. And what you'll also notice, you see the Virgin Mary, Notre Dame de Chartres was in the middle, but also you see the Holy Spirit descending in the doves just above. So this represents the good, the beautiful, and the true, which is maybe the ultimate legacy from the Greeks, which again we need to recover. Thank you.
I was going to say that I forgot to say that the 7 liberal arts were based on this early vision of beings of the spiritual world behind the powers of nature as a real experience.
Yeah.
So we're coming back to that now.
We're going to hear some more now. We're going to go more deeply into the liberal arts, courtesy of John Martineau. We're going to get your thing. So I'll just say that obviously I think, if you didn't know John Martineau already, then you will, from the website, you'll know that he's been producing these wonderful literary books for a long time. And in fact, I think it was through one of these little wooden books, which I hope he's brought some books. He's obviously brought, they've got publications on the quadrivium and on the trivium, and those are out there. I'm not sure what else he's brought. But the first one that I came across, which I fell in love with, and which is, if they had a desert island books, and you had to choose your 10 best books, this book, which is the little wooden book on coincidence, would definitely be in there for me. And it was then he has this lovely, somewhere there he's got this lovely expression. He goes, this is I think it's something to help all those of us who've been brought up in a Muggle universe. And yes, so I think we have all been. If you don't know Harry Potter, Muggle means is the poor human beings who have no magic, don't even believe in magic.
Well, what's a great event, and what a great idea to Tim Scarfield to get the 7 liberal arts moving again. I'm not an expert in 7 liberal arts. I'm merely a publisher, so I've been publishing these things for a few years. So I've accumulated a certain amount of information about them. What we're going to try and do is to use the next hour to whiz through at incredible speed what was the material that I gave a series of talks in Glastonbury before I left Glastonbury over a year. Every month we did one liberal art over 12 months, so we divided it into 12. And I've taken those talks and squished it into 1 hour, so it's going to go very fast. It's going to be lots of slides. So the 7 liberal arts are, as Nick was saying, we've got the 3 arts that relate to language, and we've got the 4 arts that relate to number. So the 7thness of the liberal arts doesn't really get fixed in time until Cassiodorus in about the 3rd century AD. For that, we've got an evolving situation where the Greeks originally were just teaching gymnastics really and poetry, and then they add music to that, and then they start to add more and more things, bits of geometry and astronomy, which is considered quite difficult to tact on, and at different times aesthetics has been bundled in there, and medicine, in fact, which was then later removed by Cassiodorus. So the idea of the 7th of it is quite late. It was essentially the curriculum for the ancient world, and it was then fully adopted by the Romans, who introduced it across the Roman Empire. So it's what we've learned, quite a watered down version in the Roman period, and it had an uneasy relationship with the early Christian church. They didn't really like it as the pagan curriculum, but after they were on top of things, they then re-adopted it. So by the medieval period, it's then being taught in again. So it's really towards the main thing that civilized people ought to know for a very, very long time indeed. And it's distinguished, if you like, from the servile art as the difference between things that can be studied essentially internally as opposed to externally. So the servile arts are, so to think of carpentry, you might be making something in the outer world, you're acting on this outer object, and you're essentially then selling it for outer gold. And the liberal arts are different in the sense that what we're really trying to do is study these things that are internal. You're trying to understand the nature of reality itself, the structure of reality itself, and the gold in the journey is essentially minimal. So here are some medieval and later Renaissance, which was its sort of final flowering, if you like, in the Renaissance. Pics of some little arts, and they've all got little different light tones. Here's work. Here's grammar, reading the meeting first, a key, and the key to the liberal arts, and here we are, Chartres. They are really ubiquitous across the ancient world. You see them everywhere. There's philosophy branching into her seven streams of knowledge. These pictures are dug up in the Warburg Institute, which remains a treasure trove of incredible stuff. Another picture here, philosophy seated with the arts emerging from quite extraordinary. And this is one of my faves, which really is the only one I found digging around, which shows the trivium pulling the quadrivium. Which is great fun, and then you've got some of the theologians sitting in the trunk. And the trivium pull the quadrivium because, in fact, before you can learn anything, you need to speak really to clearly to communicate what it is that you're going to learn. So the journey.
This guy bottom there, what's he doing?
He's music. Well, he's, I don't know who it is thrashing. This is someone thrashing the thing here, and that's music here.
Oh yeah.
Music here's. So whenever there's a four, there's astronomy. Here's geometry, and here's arithmetic. So essentially, the journey is from language through number, music, really connects, and then geometry and astronomy. We think of the ancient world come next. So we're going to be very fast now. Forgive me if I go too fast. You may have to stop me before we get to the end. So I'm going to start with your comments as an introduction to grammar. And here is grammar as the key to the liberal art. She's opening them up, holding the key of the door. And what we will need to think about in the context of before we get into grammar, we need to think of what words are and what a sound is. When we make a sound, what is that sound? So here we've got the idea that there is an original sound, there's a sort of primal sound. In the beginning was the word. And we have these ideas of divine names as well that permeate the ancient world. And the idea is really that sounds have qualities, and that everything does have its own name, something we find in the Sanskrit philosophy to this day. And Plato writes about this in Titus, where he really talks a lot about what are these primal, what are the qualities of different sounds. And we all know that we have onomatopoeic sounds, like sort of sounds that animals make, and these might have been some of our earliest noises as a species, might have been emulating the sounds of animals. And we also have more onomatopoeic words like these ones that give us some clues into our G's here. We can see these in a moment, barbers and grains and grabs and bundles and grunts. They're all kind of G-like words. Snus has its own thing, and R's have their own thing. Plato writes about the R sound in the Titus, talking about rumbles and bots and things. It's the story of Rumpelstiltskin, having his name guessed. And in fact, our names are still associated today with old traits and things like that. This nominative determinism is one of those ideas that came up in New Science a few years ago, as the idea that your name determines the job you end up doing. So it's a strange relationship between sounds. Is this lawyer will sue you? There's a BBC representative, Sarah Blue, the names we give ourselves are quite important. So, I'm just going to whiz through some of these. Just to make the point, we're just dealing primarily with English in this talk, but English is a part of this big language tree. I'm not going to stop on any slide. So just to whiz through the alphabet. This is largely taken from John Shell's work in phonics, which was a lovely reinterpretation of Tyler's. We got the rights to it and it went out to print and republished it. It's a fantastic work. So A it tends to be an air and a loft sort of sound. B's are generally sort of bifurcating, using bubbles and bottoms and boobs and things. That's the B sound. So B is a B sound. C is essentially it's John Atkins talked about it as being an enclosed sound. So you have caves, caverns. So caverns, things enclosed spaces tend to have a C at the beginning. Also sharp, cutting, clapping noises are C sounds, and John describes some more in his book, great pictures by Mary Harper. D tends to be a deadening, down, dragging quality to it, D sounds. E, I think John, we sort of don't have disagreements about E, but I think he's quite up actually, quite elevated and elfish, and generally speaking, I think. And then we get the F, which tends to be flighty and fairy and quite fun. G, as we saw, is quite stuck bogging it, bogged down in a fog. H, sort of heaven and hell, tends to be rather ethereal, big ups and downs. I's, J's are jolly jokes, japers. L's like a lazy sound. And M's tend to be arms, the shape of it tends to be mums and murmurs and they sound very nice and warm. N's tends to be quite nagging as a sound, tends to be the nagging sound. O's around sound obviously. P's tend to be sort of full of pride and persona, sort of about properness, and Q's are querulously, a big one. A quiver with zest to embark on a quest for its quirks makes queer and uneasy, perilous, havering, questioning, wavering, quarrelsome, quivering, and easy. R's, we've said earlier, rugged, rushing, rocky sounds. S, slippery, seductive, and John's got about Susie. T, tinambulations of tiny trinkets is the sort of T sound that tends to be quite like that. U's tend to be, he has sort of bugs and bugs and ducks and sort of V's, villains, vicious villains. W's are the waves and wings. X, box of tricks. Y, there's no yelping, yapping puppies, gangs of cheering kids, yelling names of yokels, yanks and yids. And said to say, sleepy sound. So the idea really behind presenting this early on is that we've got these sounds, they do have meanings, they have meanings of their own before we even stick them together into words. Now we're going to stick them together into words and into clauses and sentences, so we're doing grammar properly. And English is obviously taken from essentially a German language from French and an Indo-European language with lots of input. So when we begin to learn language, we have some early words, mama, bella, things like that. And then we get into an expanded vocabulary like this. Very soon we learn that there are two different kinds of words, particularly there are nouns and verbs. So we have substance and action. That distinction was noticed by Aristotle. And we've got some other words as well. And essentially this is our modern list of words. In fact, we've got that list of 10 here. Whether 9 or 10 parts of speech is debated. Some people put 11 verbs in as well. So essentially we've got our nouns, our adjectives, our main verbs. conjunctions and prepositions. And we put these together in different ways to create meaning. So we might have an unaddress here, or a cat loves rabbit is different to rabbit loves cat, so order matters. Inflection matters as well, swim and swam when a word changes. English is very much uninflected really compared to many languages, the worst of all being Hungarian, I believe, in Europe, where words can even have change in the middle as well as the beginnings and the ends, determining who's given what to who, exactly what happened, at what stage in the process you're going on. So here are nouns, here are pronouns, here are adjectives, our verbs, and our verbs, of course, we'll pause for a bit on verbs because we've got this time coming in here, and these things in the past, the present, and the future with verbs, and we've also got aspects, which we have 3 aspects in English. The American Indians have 28 different verb aspects, something like that. All the task is, so we have things that are they over, are they happening, or are they totally over? What's perfect and simple? Spoke or had spoken. So, so there's a lot going on with time. Here it is. You can tell. So we've got some full grid of different things that can happen to our verbs that make us position things that we're talking about in time. And we've then got lots of other little words that are coming in, adverbs and adverbials, that tell us in January in the morning we are regularly behind the shed, mysteriously, maybe, and more little words. And we find them all together. Conjunctions to stitch things together. He's tired, or he works really hard. He was sick, yet he was working. So we're beginning to get some things that are connecting different bits of the sentence together and extending beyond just putting nouns and verbs together and talking about things and how they're happening. And then we've got things that relate spatially as well. Things relate spatially in space, time, in cause, manner, and means, which are prepositions. So we need to assemble a toolkit to describe the world, what's going in on it, and how things are relating to other things, which is the function of grammar. So we end up with a noun phrase and a verb phrase. Put those two together and you can ask a sentence. The old type with no sound, let soundly on the road. So that's the section on grammar. I told you a whistle-stop tour of the 7 Noble Arts, but essentially understanding that those parts of grammar is essentially still wants to speak clearly and form sentences which are correct when it's a sentence correct because of grammar. The important thing to realise as well about language is that these words, when strung together correctly, can communicate ideas. And that's one of the most extraordinary things about language. And these ideas can then gain, in fact, a reality of their own. I think something that's very well done in that book, Sapiens, that is the early bits of that book, idea about how language creates terms, imaginary things, almost like a real thing in our world. Really well done. So although poetic mutual form isn't normally considered part of the trick, and or these days necessarily we've included in our tricking books because of the way it relates, as we'll see, to geometry, particularly, and rhythm. It is very important. So it's a quick whiz through poetic mutual form here. So poetic units in mutual form there are 4 kinds of poetic units. You've got the foot, the meter, the stanza, and the form, and essentially they're numerical. It's the easiest way to explain it. The foot, the meter, and the stanza certainly are. So let's have a look. I'm going to skip over that one actually. It's the different kinds of verse. I might just skip over that one as well. Each section of this is reduced to 1 hour at all, so we can move quick. So let's just look at feet very quickly. We've got feet, which are essentially a rhythm. debris, which is how we say debris, but the Americans say debris. Okay, so where's your emphasis going, and how many beats have you got? Where's the emphasis in it? So in English we are essentially putting a lot of emphasis on. We do speak in a very accented way. French don't speak, so if you listen to French, they go that's a different way of listening. We do really accent in English, or the Americans accent in places to us. And so we look at these essential components of rhythm. We get our most obvious one, which is called the trochee, which is done beat. One fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish. We've got the I am, done, which I put my hat upon my head and walked into the strand, so that's what we've done. We've got dactyls, we're moving to threes now, which is done beat. And Yerkel, the turtle, Dr. Seuss uses those a lot. And here's another one from Byron, Know Ye the Land of the Circus and Emeralds and Beats that are done in that climb. Is the Anapets with beats at the end, which is really done, which is because the night before Christmas was born in the house, which is stirring and eating the mouse. It's the rhythms at the end of each one of those three. And got the anti-brat, which is double and green. There's the beats in the middle. For example, is from Possums. The naming of cats is a difficult matter. It isn't just one of your holiday games. When you think of it, first things matter, how can I tell you a cat has a few different names? It's anti-brat. Then we get our much rarer, in fact, these are rarely covered in any of your works that came in, but actually they're the best. So Stephen Fry doesn't even mention them because that's not really good on meter. This is Primus Bayonet, so it's Dundee Diddy. And guess who uses them all the time is Julia Donaldson. She uses the pound of feet. Zod, the biggest dragon, was the bravest one by far. He tried his hardest every day to win the gold star. Here's the same. We were beaten in second place. It was the cavity was no one so here's the beaten third place. The Tertius Bayonet. Julia Donaldson again, in a small beside a river where the lambs did eventually put her couple of dinosaurs in the water's edge. So you see there all great fun. So the next component is the meters. And the meters really we can do very quickly because all we're doing essentially is sticking somebody's feet together in a certain thing. If we have 1 foot, we call it 1 meter, 2 feet is diameter, 3 feet is trimeter, 4 feet is tetrameter, 5 feet is hexameter, 6 feet is hexameter. I'm not going to give these up for obvious reasons. But let's have a look at the trimeter. Here we are. I love the jog and dance, the softly breathing song, where it was a nicely dance and the lips remain stung. So that's we're sticking together some I ams there. How many of them? 3 each one. So that's why it's called iambic trimeter. There's an anapest and tetrameter is 4 feet. Out there now, stroke, brave, gracious, captain of the gate. Let's do Lennon McCartney here. So dactylic tetrameter means there's going to be 4 of those dactyls, which in 3 is going to be. So picture yourself in a boat on a river with tangerine trees and marmalade skies. So your answer was that you have to go. So that's essentially pentameter, 5 feet was the basic workhorse of Shakespeare, and the pentameter, got Shakespeare there. It's rough winds to shake the darling what's it made, and sun seas apple to short. 5 on 1, 5 numbers. Stanza is then in poetry. How many lines we're putting? So we've got a foot, we've pretended to line, that's how many lines do we really put together. And things get complicated when we add rhyme, which is very important. And there's different kinds of rhymes. We've got sound rhymes, rhymes at the beginning, rhymes at the end, alliteration, we can have consonant rhyming. We can have a cross rhyme, that's when we go to the rhyme, alliterations, I rhymes, things that just look the same, like look and move. And all sorts of different kinds of rhymes. Let's just go back to that one now, where we can see a sort of structure beginning to form here to do with rhyming scheme or A's and B's. Starting to form a stanza, the rhymes gluing all together. And couplets of 2 lines, triplets and terces Peter with 4 lines. So be nice to your turkey this Christmas, invite them indoors for some greens, let them eat cake and let them partake on a plate of organic grain beans. We've got more 4s and some and 5s. And 5 famous 5 is the limerick, again, glued together by 1. So, again, that's going to a lot of detail. I want to leave it sort of that and move on to logic. Grammar was a particularly long section for some reason. Logic, we do that quickly. Logic, the second liberal art is...
Did you speak up a bit?
I'm really sorry, thanks for the reminder again. So logic is the second liberal art. In logic, we're trying to find out when a sentence is true. So we've seen what we can do with language, and we're not really trying to communicate anything yet, are we? We're just playing. But logic, what we're doing with logic is we're trying to make sure that what we say is true. We're trying to find out what truth is. So just look at this diagram. It's rather sweet. Here's dialectic and the logic, and she's catching a fallacy, a slippery fish, if you like, in her net, in a logical net. And dialectic is an early form of logic, Greek form of logic, where you get to the truth of something by firing backwards and forwards between two people. So you have a thesis and then a counter thesis, and then you move to a new position from those. So I'm not going to read the long one. I'm going to read the short one at the bottom. So here's a modern way that you might hear dialectic in the modern world. A thesis, I say, don't you think Sheila is wonderful? On the contrary, I disagree. She hurt Bill terribly. No. Yes, Sheila is complicated. So you can see how we do it all the time, in fact. I say something, someone sort of disagrees with you, and then you both move to a new thing. So in fact, dialectic is the common way of discussion, really, in many ways. However, when it comes to truth itself, and getting to the truth rather than just a compromise or putting two opposing positions together, we need to look at logic itself, which obviously is completely transformed in a certain sense of the world. All our gadgets and everything now work using logic circuits, which go right back to Plato, really. And the sword, here's a different picture of logic, and here she is speaking, and we've got truth coming out of her trumpet, truth is flowering out of her mouth, and she's got the sword of syllogisms here to cut up. She's stamping underneath her feet these fallacies and all sorts of other things. We're going to see some of these characters in the slides which follow. So there are 4 basic kinds of reasoning that are now understood by logicians, and some of these were understood a long time. The 4th one is slightly more creeps in slightly more modern times. So we have deductive reasoning, which is based on syllogism, where we have these kind of things. I'm not going to go through these. We have inductive reasoning, where we form a hypothesis and then we test it. We have abductive reasoning, where this is more probabilistic. We form a hypothesis and say, here's an example, this one's less well known. If it rains, the grass becomes wet. That's true. The grass is wet. It's most likely to rain. So we deduce things like that all the time. In fact, abductive reasoning, as opposed to these two, is again something we do all the time. And logical reasoning is totally something we do all the time, as opposed to computers. So, and logical reasoning is when we see something that looks like an apple, we assume it's an apple. It looks like an apple. In fact, it might be a wax apple, but we assume it's an apple. That's an analogy. Or we can see something's apple shaped. We also assume it is something related to an apple. But this thing here relates to truths across all of logic. 2 things are necessary for a sound conclusion. The premises must be true, and the reasoning must be valid. So, there are different ways of doing this. There's modes opponents, there's modes tolens, and moving on. I just need to do a time check.
I am not time to
No. Okay, alright, well, I'll keep going. Sorry, anytime. As syllogisms seem quite complicated. You just realise that it's things nested inside each other. You can draw a Venn diagram. Here we've got the classic all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, and therefore Socrates is mortal. So you can see we've got sorry? Left. Have I I already talking 40? Am I? Really?
We started late,
Yeah, I finished sorry, really late. Yeah. I can time this for an hour, here is our opposites. And so the medieval period, people got very, very into these what's called diagrams, the different sort of syllogisms, and using alls, noes, sums. And then people began to realise that only some statements could be true. And this occupied logicians in the medieval period for a long period of time. And eventually they realised that of the 64 possible combinations of here, only 24 of them, in fact, were true. The rest were fallacies. Here's an example of a statement like that. All cats have 4 legs. I have 4 legs. Therefore, I'm a cat. So that's a fallacy. These fallacies were mostly named then throughout the medieval period. And it was then later that people began to realise as well that language could introduce impossible things, impossible objects, paradoxes that had no real way out. So here's a classic one. This sentence is false. Well, if it's false, then it's true. If it's true, then it's false. And you can double that up into 2 lines. The following sentence is true. The preceding sentence is false. Again, work through your real trouble. And there are other paradoxes as well. And leave that one. Here's another important thing about logic, is substance and accident. So substance and accident was something that Aristotle wrote about the first time. In a sense, it's like the tall Greek woman stood poised in the balcony with a long black ball gown. A lot of that is accident. The actual substance of that is the woman stood on the balcony. That's sort of substance. Well, if you like, you could really say just it's the woman on the balcony. And so, in fact, what happens when you muddle up substance and accident is that you get problems like Lewis Carroll identified here. I've often seen a cat without a grin, thought Alice, but a grin without a cat. It's a curious thing. So you're muddling up an accident which needs something. So, and then we have dilemmas. I'm not going to show lots of dilemmas, but dilemmas are widely used in debates, and false dilemmas particularly. Here's someone saying, I stand against going to war, and here's someone over here saying, since you're against war, you must be against our troops. So it's essentially creating a false dilemma. And then we have a lot of fallacies as well, all identified, and there's some wonderful websites full of fallacies which are, again, they're good to know about because they are peddled every single day by politicians, the media, spin doctors, advertisements. We're going to get more into that in rhetoric in a second. Here are some classic ones, the straw man, where someone says something to you. In fact, we will do it much, much more than you think. Someone says something to you, and you pick a different argument with them immediately. In this case, someone saying, I think I deserve to share credit with the author, and someone says, so fame is more important to you than science, is it? So you actually hear it a lot more than you think. Red herring fallacy is a logical fallacy as well, different ways that, again, we hear it a lot. And in fact, it's one great way of getting around, which is now a toy, let's rush home. Distract someone's attention with something completely different. And you can appeal to humans. Let's do post hoc ergo propter, which is a statistical fallacy. And a related one to do the causation fallacy. And what's wrong? Whenever I do this experiment, it fails. I must be the problem. Thinking that correlation means causation. So, in fact, without realising it, we have all grown up in this world of logic, and we think logically, and we are also deliberately misuse logic, most of us regularly. And in fact, it was the deliberate misuse of logic that was the big difference between the sophists and the other bunch back in ancient Greek. And Plato particularly disliked rhetoric. What essentially the sophists realised was that to win arguments, you have to play a bit 2030. And also there are other factors involved as well, which were emotion. Humans we're not robots, we're not computers. So essentially you could say that the modern world is essentially built on the logic, on syllogistic logic, if you like, which I didn't go into a huge amount of detail. That's ands and ors and nots. And every computer in the world has at its core this great big engine just going and not is equals. And essentially Aristotle came along and said, actually when talking to human beings, there's a different set of stuff going on, and that is rhetoric. And rhetoric is difficult in that context. Rhetoric is the flowering of language, if you like. It's language with flowers on. It's decorated. It's might as well say why decorate anything ever? You don't need to. But yet we do. You might say why say it this way rather than that? That's another way of thinking about rhetoric. Lots of different ways of saying something. Which way are you going to say it? If the meaning's going to be the same, it's going to have the same logical content. But why say it this way rather than that way? That's what rhetoricians are interested in. So it's very close to the literary arts as well, and back to poetry and what we're really trying to communicate and why. So here's late rhetoric, and it's an old French tapestry that. And Aristotle's a classic quote: the ability in each case to see all the available means of persuasion. So rhetoric essentially works by having a purpose. What's the purpose of what you're trying to say? Is you, and who are you talking to? Is it one person or many? And it's something that we again, rhetoric is innate. I had a QC, Queen's Council lawyer saying a few weeks ago, and I said, how's your rhetoric? Do you study how many rhetorical figures do you use? And he said, I haven't got a clue. But we'll be using lots just naturally every day, but it's never formally studied the subject. And most of us learn rhetoric in these situations as a kid. So let's just look at essentially some real elements of rhetoric. We've got a time. Let's look at the time thing here. It's not a good slide, I'm sorry, but essentially, often we talk either in the past or in the present or in the future, and essentially the past tense, we say, why did you do that? Or, you broke that vase, or something like that. When we use the past tense, we're generally talking about blame. And when we use the present tense, I like something, what do you, I'm going to the shops. We're then often talking about values and choices that we're making in the present time. So the present tense tends to be values often, and the future tense tends to be often about choices and solutions. So it's quite a good idea when you're talking, if you're ever in a situation of disagreement, so the tense in the past will probably be blame. If you want to, you can flip it by moving it to the present tense and then say, well, what are you going to do next? Move it to the future tense, you'll ultimately reach a solution. And the Greeks understood that a long time ago. So there are 5 canons of rhetoric, which is essentially what we're doing. This is particularly about speech writing. So you're having to invent, you're developing your persuasion, you're arranging your ideas, and you're memorising it. The Art of Memory is a marvellous book by Francis Yates, and well worth reading about the ancient memory schools and style. How are you going to deliver it, and why? And there's some clues to all of this as well in rhetoric. There are two big ideas. Kairos is timing, very, very important, and it's closely related to forum, which is aligning your message with the room you're speaking in, and just getting it right, getting your clothes right, opening your speech right, and that really comes down to virtues actually. And then come back to it, and that comes down to this triangle here, which is very, very important to note as well, which is the ethos, logos, and pathos. Just stop here for a moment. What the ethos is the character, if you like, and credibility of the speaker, or the worthiness of the cause that's being spoken about. The logos is the the logic of the arguments being delivered, and there's any emotions and you might want to bring to bear. And the general journey that you do in a speech, you do from ethos to logos to pathos. Obama was trivially trained Barack Obama. All of his speeches are classically orientated on this journey. So first of all, you establish some ethos that might even tell a story about your grandpa or something, but whatever it is, it's like it anchors this. So he's a good sort. I'm going to listen to him, and then you use logos, which is the meat of the argument, and then you finish it off with something that pulls the heartstrings and all the rest of it. And these three appeals are used widely. We're surrounded by them all the time. So here's ethos. You've got a well-known character, celebrity selling something that's ethos, gives it credibility. You've got pathos that was brought up, and we get to all the time on those charity adverts and gosh, and then you have logos where it's this makes sense. This is the right thing, and so on and so forth. And then we have rhetorical figures as well, which are iterations, different ways that you might put things together. And at the core of a lot of it is repetition. You're repeating the sound or pattern. Into the epistrophe. It's also an example of tricolon. So you've got a word at the end. Repeat a word at the beginning. So those who are, so these people. This is senior people, individual, that's it. So they've over the centuries, the traditions have labelled every different kind of pattern of language really, and studied this as epicity. Tricolons, we are 3 times, repeating, implication, elevation, lock, stock and barrel. With the human mind loves 3s, we see that in music and geometry. These are interesting, where you miss something out. These big it up works well. Take it down, litotes. Not very much. Not bad, honestly. It's litotes, understatements, and then humour. Very important aspect of rhetoric. Here's a good example of a recipe for humour. Humour's really only got about 3 or 4 real strings to it. It's intelligence put together. But here's a classic one. It's delivered in 3. So it's Thanksgiving. You invite the neighbours over. So you've got your 2 bits, and then you twist the 3rd one. And then we killed and stole the land. So didn't get along. I'm not a comedian, but that's one of the rules. You go 1, 2, and then twist the last one, and then another good component humour is playing. Rhetoric and comedy are very closely related. We all have when we hear it, saying what we mean. For comic effects, different from sarcasm, where you say what you mean to create fun. Trivia. I mean, maybe I've stopped there. I think my eye may be up. I can just keep going. Keep going.
Yeah, no.
Okay, the next bit will be quicker. I think that wasn't that slow. The number, we're going to just whiz through these. They will be a lot of complex. So, let's see. Study the number is. So just pause for a moment. We just have some letters. Everything we've just done was added to core letters. Right up to those metaphors you read on the screen, because their component parts were letters. And when your component parts are numbers, something different happens.
number.
It's a mystical thing. It
Something
comes
very
into,
interesting.
it pops up in music, interestingly. You can see it appearing in musical groups. And one is obviously the one. I'm just not going to get too much physical because we've got too much to do. One's the one architecture, ancient traditional architecture often built in a circle. One's the circle, one's the not even a line. One then dividing into two, and obviously the two we begin to have. I think the reason I find it quite hard to talk about zero was that I'm sort of one of those kind of Gnostics at heart, and that whole idea that you can't talk about the one, but is to talk about it is to separate yourself from it, and therefore to completely make a mess of what the number actually is in the first place. So it is almost impossible to talk about. Two you really can talk about, and we have sort of level two, picture of two-ness, and essentially it's the idea of opposites, and opposition really comes in with two. And the two then intersect to go to the third point of view, which are three, and three is the first shape that makes a shape. The first number makes a shape, rather than line, two is just making a line, one is the point if you like, and three is making the first shape, a triangle. And three is strong as well. It's a triangle shape. It's not the first shape, but it is the strongest of all the shapes. So it's stable. In music, we get it as in fact, I'll leave that when we get to music. Three chords as well. These are coming from a longer talk, really. Much like by artists, we have all sorts of triangles, metaphysical triangles, physical triangles, and it dates back. Again, this tricolon, we love our opposites and our threes are really big things, which are nice. That's a nice one. So you can see the present really is a slice. So the past goes back for ages and the future's going on forever, but the present just slicing through those two. And we saw our threes in Turkey, and Manhattan, and those ribbons and our crayons. We've got three colours of light, three primary colours of light. And of course we've got our three-dimensional world. And then fours, I'm not going to go. Four, we pop into 3D with the tetrahedron. And we've got four seasons, four states of matter, four print colours, four directions. We spatially orientated ourselves in a fourfold way, and ancient cities were fourfold, and so on and so forth. And fives. That's a nice interface between 4 and 5, isn't it? We're at an interface between 4 and 5. And 5, the number of life. Essentially, don't really get it much outside the living world. And senses, hypertonic solids, 5 discrete notes in the pentatonic scale. We'll get to that in music in a second. And 6, a triangular number, and a perfect number. All sorts of 6y things. 7s, 7 discrete white notes. 8, we get into octaves in the periodic table, and it's a Fibonacci number. Fibonacci numbers, I really do think I have to just zip over it for every time. It's fibs, but Fibonacci numbers rule the natural world. Leave it at that. 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. All of organic life on Earth, really, most of flowering plants, and point for the Fibonacci numbers. They also pop up in the underlying structure of reality. Here you've got three 2D subgrids, 2D grids, regular grids. We've got 3 regular grids, 5 atomic solids. You've got 8 semi-regular grids, tilings, and you've got 13 Archimedean solids. So the structure of space unfolds according to the Fibonacci numbers, as well as music, all sorts of other things. So, and then we get to modern number. Let's just move into modern numbers. Quick tour. We've got things like the magic number that comes from exponential growth. And we've got our square roots, which we'll see in geometry in a second. And we've got pi, which goes quite back. So it is a very ancient number. And relating that circles diameter to a circumference. And then we've got the number that rules the modern world. So square root of minus 1, I, and that is that gaze. That's the complex numbers, there's the complex plane, and the complex plane is given us quantum mechanics and fractals. Everything. All this surrounded by technology that uses the square root of minus 1 as its foundation. So that's the numbers. We've only got what to do. Okay, we've got music, so music essentially, just really quick, it has these components: melody, tempo, fold, harmony, dynamics, tempo, and rhythm. We're just going to look at harmony and melody, not really the rhythm. So harmony unfolds really like fractions. That's the way of thinking about harmony. Harmony is fractions, simple fractions, and fractions in visualising these which is one of the reasons that architecture was thought of as frozen music, because it's using these very simple ratios, 2 to 3. So in fact, the most simple ratio is 1 to 2 there, 1 to 1, 1 to 2, then you've got 2 to 3, and you have 3 to 4. And you can see that 2 to 3 is the same as 4 to 6. The same rectangle, that's called proportion. That's the difference between ratio and proportion. And what Pythagoras' predecessor has discovered is that when two notes are vibrating or in very simple harmonies, they sound very nice. So it might be 1 to 2 was the picture I think I've actually got it. So he discovers that the simple ratios give very pleasurable sounds to the human ear. And when arranged, that's all the most simple fractions you can get, up to 10, up to 9, and 9 and 10. And when arranged, what you see is that the identical ones, 3 to 9, here, let's look at 2 to 8, and 1 to 4. If you draw lines through the ones that are identical, they converge on 0 and not on 1. So this is one of the things where the mysterious 0 pops in, actually, which you don't really get in geometry. You get to origin in geometry. And, it's very interesting to use it. So here are fifths and fourths. Essentially, the way music, to do it really quickly, the way that music unfolds is always through a division into 2 unequal bits. So we've got our octave. We're going to see what happens. What you get is you get your fifth. Your octave is 2 to 1, and you get a fifth, which is 3 to 2, and you get a fourth, which is 4 to 3. And the fifth and the fourth aren't the same. They're different. But when you multiply them together, you get your octave. And one of them sounds happy. One of them sounds slightly less happy. And that's the pattern of music. It just does that again and again and again. So the next thing it does